If it's so easy to disintermediate the marketplace and you're so ready and willing to do it as a consumer, as on the demand side of the marketplace, then the marketplace isn't doing a good job, right? It doesn't add enough value to justify its fee. It's really that simple. So why don't you disintermediate Uber? I mean, you could just get the guy's number and call him every time he needed a ride, right? Exactly. You can't do that, right?
There's not a lot of guys who I'll listen to for 10 minutes straight and at the end feel so dumb. And I think Seth Rosen is one of them. He's wired differently, and yet he comes off extremely just normal, run-of-the-mill, like have a beer kind of a guy. And he's just, super well-spoken. He's humble, insightful, clearly very hardworking, but we're honored to have him as our guest this week. Crazy background. I won't go too much into it because he does himself, but having like hard knock education through the real estate world as like his first entry into business and honing his relationship and people skills, and then going into like investment banking and finance and becoming like the youngest partner ever at his firm, and then co-founding a business custom made, which specializes in one of a kind jewelry, especially for major events like weddings and engagements and whatnot. It's just crazy story, and it definitely shows that it doesn't matter what your background is. If you find an opportunity and you're in love with entrepreneurship, you go after it.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, this is a great one. This is a really special episode of The Big W. We're happy that Seth joined us. And a couple big takeaways that I think the listeners and people watching on YouTube can get from this. I mean, Seth does a great job at explaining how the second time he ran custom made, because he ran it, sold it, then ran it again. The second time he prioritized the team first before the problem. When you and I just riffed off that, it was a super interesting conversation. The second half of this podcast is better than the first half. The first half, you and I were just getting warmed up and Seth was just on his training wheels. The second half is awesome. But the second half of the conversation, he does a little 5-minute riff about a challenge he might have in his business. And you and I were almost speechless after the 5-minute answer. It's an incredible one. It's about 40-ish minutes in. The other thing he talked about, which I really liked, was the thing he called the anxiety curve of the consumer, which was incredibly interesting.
We've always heard people who say like, hey, you need to offer a guarantee to help the potential buyer get over their biggest fear. And that's pretty solid advice, but that's the extent of it. He went through like the curve of anxiety and how to like lead people along that and like get people off of that. It's just unbelievable. This guy is brilliant.
Yeah. Great interview. Great interview. We're excited to bring you Seth Rosen. Thank you for being part of the Big W. We are excited to really have you on. I think your story is very unique. We're two guys who own an insurance agency. It's very, very, very different than using anything with our hands. And you have a company that initially started with custom made. It's just such an interesting story. We really want to go back and kind of highlight the beginning so our audience has a little bit of understanding of like where it was, where it's going, and we're just really excited to share your story. So thank you for taking some time.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Of course. So let's start. Let's start from the beginning. So you, it sounded like in the college years, based on the research we did in prior chats with you, in college, you were just kind of like naturally entrepreneur-ish. And it sounds like you met a pivotal person around that time. Can you go through like how you met your partner and what you guys were doing in the early days?
Well, I didn't have any money in college, so I guess I needed some. I had a scholarship to go to BU, so I had some outside scholarship money that sort of paid my tuition, but then I didn't have any money to live or do anything else. So I ultimately ended up getting a job as a real estate broker, renting apartments. And in many ways, as I'm sure you guys know, as insurance brokers, broker is just a fantastic way to learn interpersonal skills, sales skills, time management skills. Like there's just so many skills that, nothing against BU, but I definitely learned more in my 4 years as a full-time real estate guy than I did, going to class. And it's funny, like a lot of my friends, the people I still keep in touch with today, I don't keep in touch with anybody from college, but I keep in touch with tons of people I worked with over the time I was 18 to 22, 23. So yeah, that was my first foray into the working world. I met my good buddy Mike Salguero. In 2002, I'd already been doing the job for a while. I actually got recruited to manage the office next door to the office I started working in. And Mike came in to get a job. He'd been working at the bar across the street and was like, I want to rent apartments. I was like, well, you need a license for that. You can't just like rent apartments. You have to have a real estate license. He was like, great, I'm going to get a license. I'll be back next week. Tons of people say this. Sure enough, he went and got the license. He came back the next week, a few weeks later, whatever. And I was like, okay. And so, we were hanging out ever since. And so we always talked about going into business together, but we sort of started it in different jobs. I started my career as a structured debt capital markets investment banker, had absolutely nothing to do with my undergraduate education or real estate brokerage, and maybe a little bit because it was primarily focused on real estate. But I did that for a while at what was then Meredith and Grew. It was sold while I was there. While I was in business school, I was working there. So I became a partner when I was 26, youngest partner in the history of firm, but it started in 1875 or something. J. Morse Meredith. Been around for a long time. That business sold to First Service Corporation. I was an extraordinarily minor partner. I don't know if they could make a more minor partner than me, but at least I was a partner. And so the business got sold. And I always wanted to do something entrepreneurial, and I left sort of in the midst of the market crash, 2008, 2009. Mike had been laid off from his job, and we were like, let's start a business. Let's buy a business. We've been looking for something to do. And I was, at the time, was getting lots of custom furniture made. I had more money than family obligations or brains. So I was getting custom stuff. One of those custom things was furniture. I got interested in it. And I met a guy who had listed all of his furniture on custommade.com. I kept running across custommade.com every time I did a search. And we reached out to try to buy the website from this guy, Ted Wheaton-Krause, who had literally started the website in 1996 to teach himself how to build websites. And we convinced him over a long period of time, to sell us this small old website. Very interestingly, as I would come to learn later, this was a very pivotal moment in my life, because I've since bought many, many old shitty websites. Sorry, am I allowed to say websites on here?
Yeah, bring it up.
Anyways, so I've since bought many old shitty websites, and it turns out that it's not such a bad business. And so that was the start of something interesting. We bought the website. It had about 300 fine furniture makers on it at the time. We built an inside sales team to basically grow it into a listing service for people who make custom stuff. Woodworkers, furniture makers, jewelers, metalworkers, glassworkers, anyone who makes anything custom.
How do you analyze this business? How much did you buy it for, if that's the information you can disclose? And how did you know it was worth this? Like, talk us through how you analyze this. This is a massive change.
It's very different. So I paid $140,000 for the website in 2009.
Matt, did we pay the same price for Insure with GN, or is that like...
I think it was $15 for a 5-year contract. Yep.
Yeah, we're not nearly worth as much. Go on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just, I don't know. I mean, I think it did $35,000 a year when I bought it. And I think we would buy it for 4 times revenue. I mean, I don't know. We came up with some cockamamie valuation idea that seemed to make some sense. I mean, I've since learned a lot about valuation, and I've concluded that valuing an old website is in some ways an extremely analytical exercise, and in others not really. I mean, ultimately, all of the value is added by coming in and turning it into what it needs to be. And if you overpay a little bit for something good that you're uniquely positioned to add value to, it doesn't matter. And if you underpay for something great and you don't know how to run it, it's still going to be a failure. It also doesn't matter. So you kind of pay a little more than you want, and the guy who's selling it or girl who's selling it usually gets a little less than they want, and that's how you know it's the right price.
If you were looking to purchase this website, obviously you were looking to add value and scale it. What was the initial concept for scaling the business? Where do you think you could take this?
Yeah, I mean, we were like, well, custommade.com should be like custom everything, custom anything. It was a passion of mine. I thought it was very cool. I didn't know anything about running a business. I mean, I thought it would be cool to have a place where you could go get anything you wanted custom made and deal directly with the person who's making it. I've since learned that's a terrible idea, at least in the broad context. It has changed dramatically in the 10 years since I bought it the first time. This is obviously the second. I bought it twice now.
That's the spoiler. You just had a spoiler, and now we have to edit that all out because we had to talk about...
I know.
So that makes sense. You're looking to scale the business by basically just offering products of all types that were custom, not just furniture of 30 different retailers or 30 different designers.
Yeah, we initially looked at it like a real estate play, right? We were like, wow, this is like a building, but you can add as many tenants as you want.
Yeah, when you were detailing out, you had a great point earlier about overpaying or underpaying for a website. It doesn't necessarily really matter. It's more about your plan. And I initially immediately related that to real estate, and it makes sense, like, because it's difficult to say someone you overpaid for a home. It depends what you value it and what you see you're doing it down the road. It doesn't necessarily matter. If you buy beachfront property and you're doing something with it, I don't care what you pay for it. Then again, if you buy a beachfront property for a little bit and you do nothing with it, it's a waste of money. Like, the whole thing is the same thing. So I relate that back to your website. But you clearly and your partner had a plan that you were doing, and you broke it down and you said we can make this bigger. So you are really kind of renovating the property, meaning the website. And it sounds like you really got to work right away on that website. You renovated the website and the team? Was it at the same time, or?
We did everything. I mean, we didn't know where we were going, but we were very motivated. We were going to get there fast. So that's what we did. We redid the website, added a whole bunch of makers, grew it into a pretty small business, but largely break-even business. And then we decided we wanted to, we had added quite a few makers. You know, we tripled or quadrupled the size of the business in terms of number of makers, and much more than that in terms of revenue. And then we decided what we wanted to do. We saw all these transactions going through, all these introductions that we were making. And instead of being an introduction service that charges a subscription fee, we decided that we wanted to stand in between these transactions and get a piece of the transaction. So instead of being a dating service, we decided we wanted to start officiating weddings.
That's a good way to look at it. I like that analogy.
Between 2011 and 2015, we raised about $30 million of venture capital from Google Ventures, First Round Capital, a whole bunch of top-tier venture capitalists, and we tried to build the largest online marketplace for custom goods and services. Very complex business to build, because essentially you're standing in between a non-commoditized service provider, right? A guy who makes furniture, a very non-commoditized service. You're not going to shop it around, right? It needs to be designed, needs to be specified. It's a whole bunch of very unique aspects to this. And a customer doesn't know what they want. So you've got someone who isn't that great necessarily at dealing with customers, but might be very good at making things. And then you've got a customer who really doesn't know, but thinks they need something unique. And then you're standing in between and trying to make it work and taking a fee. So that was the business we built. We were initially quite successful. And as we continued to grow into the 8 figures in merchandise volume, some of the weaknesses in the model became rather clear. And we decided that it was simply not going to be a workable model. It wasn't going to be a venture scale business. So we made a deal with Wayfair to essentially hire our employees. I don't know how much of that deal is public, but basically everyone in our organization got a job, and we got some money and some other compensation. And we ended up with a relatively small team and a bunch of assets that were previously owned by venture capitalists. And now we needed to figure out what to do.
A couple of years ago, obviously not during COVID, but if I were to go to Airbnb or VRBO, any of those kind of places, Vrbo, HomeAway, and I were to try to rent a home, my wife or I would go on, and we'd always get contacted directly by the person being like, hey, just go off the website and contact me directly and avoid the fee and yada, yada, yada. And, there's obviously some liability aspects of that, but it's like $500 less or $1,000 less. It's hard to say no. Was that happening at your business? I know, very random question, but it seems kind of correlated. Was that happening?
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic marketplace problem, right? Disintermediation. I mean, it's a problem for any broker, but sure, yeah. I mean, disintermediation in an online marketplace is one of the top concerns. Certainly it happened. We got really good at catching it, but you can't ever catch it all. People have written so many blog posts about this. It's a very, very simple problem. I mean, here's what I boiled it down to. This is after a decade of experience with marketplaces, okay? If it's so easy to disintermediate the marketplace, and you're so ready and willing to do it as a consumer, as on the demand side of the marketplace, then the marketplace isn't doing a good job, right? It doesn't add enough value to justify its fee. It's really that simple. So why don't you disintermediate Uber? I mean, you could just get the guy's number and call him every time he needed a ride, right? Exactly. You can't do that, right? Because it's a commodity service. Really, you're not looking to have a relationship with the driver. You're looking for a ride from point A to point B, and you're looking for a platform to facilitate your consumption of a complete commoditized service, right? It's a perfect application of a marketplace concept. It's also a perfect venture backable type of enterprise because you have to subsidize it to scale. And once you have liquidity, it has a lot of value. And until you have liquidity, it really doesn't have any value. Mm-hmm. Now, I've seen all kinds of people extrapolate marketplace. It's like SaaS, software as a service, right? It's, oh my God, marketplace, it's amazing business. No, it's sometimes in certain contexts, but I think a marketplace can be a great business. Like any tool, it's the right tool for some specific use cases. The problem becomes when people take a use case where a marketplace is not the most elegant solution, is not the optimal solution, and they try to massage their thing into marketplace because people like marketplaces, right? Or just like they do with all kinds of other models. Remember group buying? Right? If I buy one thing, it's not that cheap. But if I can get 100 of my friends to buy it, I can get it for cheaper. The group buying is going to be the future. Like, there's so many of these, like, it's the future. This is the way everyone's going to do it. And it rarely is, right? Some of it is true. And oftentimes there is an elegant solution to a specific problem, but that doesn't mean that it's universally applicable. We had two problems. Team was not a problem. We developed a good team. Money was not a problem. We were able to raise all the money we needed. Money was not a limiting factor in our ability. We could have spent money on almost anything over time. We were resource constrained at certain points, but that wasn't what happened, right? What happened is we didn't truly understand the nature and character of the market we were going after. We didn't understand the size of the market. We didn't try to build a business that was correctly structured to take advantage of the size of the market that we were going after. Inherently, we just made some mistakes about the market opportunity that just were insurmountable mistakes. I mean, it doesn't matter how smart you are. You're not going to outsmart a market and model mistake.
That's really well said. And I think a lot of our listeners probably nodding their heads listening to that as well, because I know even personally over the years, like seeing something and being like, oh, like I'll be the Match.com of that. I could create that. I could see there would be a lot of value there, but never have I ever once thought about what I'm connecting and who I'm connecting it to and what limitations there would be for scale. And it makes so much sense, especially if it's something so personal that it requires not only a custom product to be designed, but a custom process for every single product. Like there's got to be that back and forth, et cetera. And so that makes a lot of sense and almost applaud you for being self-aware enough, knowing that you could have all the finance, all the money you need to continue to do this, but if it wasn't the right setup, it made sense to move on. So you came up with this transaction with Wayfair, creative solution, yada, yada. How and why would you ever go back and look to purchase it again? I mean, I would love to know. That's what I'm most interested in hearing about. It's like, this feels like if it was something I did, I'd be like, I don't ever want to see and touch that again. Like it's been such,
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a very interesting point, right? Which is the setup is everything. There's so many examples of this in life and in business, but like ultimately, if you have a pretty good or optimal setup and you're a good operator, even sometimes a marginal operator, you can make it work. If you're a good operator in a good market, like with a good team, I mean, look, you guys picked insurance, right? Like second largest industry in the whole goddamn world, right? Behind banking, right? Real estate being a distant third, right? But it's a massive industry, recurring revenue, inherently a fantastic business, right? So a little bit of disruption can have a big impact in that space, right? So setup was incorrect. So when I redid it the second time, I thought a lot more about setup. There were really two issues that drove me to repurchase it. So one, I had learned what a really great team looks like because there were several key people on my team that I knew were incredibly difficult to replace and could do magical stuff if put on the right problem. I just had not put them on the right problem. So the setup was bad. And two, I believed there was a cross-section of the market. There was something that could be built from the foundation that we had built before. And I did not feel that we had brought the business to a conclusion that I was proud of. And I said when I started it that we would stop when I got to a conclusion that I was proud of, right? And so obviously I didn't realize at the time that I would be committing some massive portion of my life to this project and its subsequent iterations, but that notwithstanding, we had a lot of unfair advantages. I restarted a business with a massive organic traffic footprint. I had an ass-kicking founding team. I had my VP engineering refounded the business with me. He's an unbelievable guy, brilliant guy. My head of product was amazing. I'd worked with these people already. I knew that there was something great here. And I knew that we knew if there was anything to be built in custom services, no one had spent more time and more money getting data on what works and what doesn't. I mean, you think about the number of transactions. We literally watched hundreds of thousands of transactions. We knew what happened, what went wrong. We tried to fix it. We realized where we were inadequate in fixing it. And so we basically got back the business, to make a very long story short, and we said, we're going to build a new business out of the old. So we bought it back and we started an online custom jewelry business. And the reason we did that is, one, the only vertical where true bespoke custom, meaning making something actually from scratch with every customer every time, the only vertical market where I believe that works is custom jewelry, specifically bridal jewelry. We do a lot of different types of custom jewelry, but bridal jewelry being the primary focus, although we make a lot of very complicated stuff.
Why is that? Why is it the only vertical?
So all the reasons that you said, right? Like, what do you have to do? You have to take a customer who doesn't know what they want. Customer's not a jewelry designer. They have ideas, of course, of the things that they might want, and they might have pictures, right? But someone needs to turn a germ of an idea into a transactable specification that can be manufactured. And it's not like 3 engineers are getting in a room and engineering something. We're working with a customer who doesn't know how to make jewelry, and we need to translate their idea into a transactable specification, make sure they know what they're going to get, so manage their expectations accordingly, mitigate the anxiety they may feel that it's not going to turn out as expected, and then deliver it to a high quality standard, and then stand behind it. The biggest change, one, is we focused on one vertical that we understood very well. I own a bunch of other properties in and around the space as well, so I understand the jewelry business reasonably well now. And two, we picked a model that was much easier to control. So rather than us stand between the person who manufactures it and the customer, we became the jeweler. So custom made is not a marketplace. We do not outsource the work to a network of jewelers. We are the jeweler. If you get something from us, we will manufacture it.
That is a massive difference. Massive.
Huge difference. Huge difference. We're a jeweler. We're an online jeweler. That's all we are.
So
And it's fundamental level.
I want to hear more on that, but that takes care of the problem that I brought up earlier. You eliminate one of the problems that's most talked about. And you eliminate a lot of other problems. You obviously...
You eliminate a lot of problems. So what are the major problems? Here's the major problems you eliminate. You create a bunch of problems too, so don't worry about that. But you eliminate what major problems, right? So certainly disintermediation, you eliminate that problem. 2, you eliminate the margin problem. When you're a broker, what do you get? You get a small piece of the profit, right? Now that's good because you don't have to do anything. I mean, you do, right? You have to provide the service, of course, and service the customer. But on a fundamental level, like if you're an insurance broker, you don't have to actually manage the balance sheet and fund the claims yourself, right? You're not the insurance, you're the broker. The same is true if you're a broker in an online marketplace, right? Like you get a comparatively small fee for doing that. It can be a very profitable business if you're only doing brokerage. The problem is in our business, inherently, you get sucked into doing things that go far beyond brokerage because you've got 2 parties who just aren't systematized and streamlined to interact with each other. It solves the margin problem. Now I get retail margins. My margins are certainly better than a broker's margins would be. And that means I can provide a much higher level of service to the customer. And we're in a very heavy service business.
When you presented this and said, you know what, we're killing the marketplace concept, we're turning custom made into a jeweler, we're going to be the jeweler, we're going to hit this hard and become, an online jewelry platform and we're going to crush it. What were their responses to that?
The reality is I did not have that level of vision. There wasn't some moment or epiphany. There never is, right? Where I was like, holy shit, guys, I've got the answer. Do you want to get on this next rocket shit? Like, it didn't happen like that, right? This is what happened. I went around. First, I went to Sasha Shustef, my co-founder, and I said, look, there's definitely something still here. I think we can figure it out. We're going to have to make some big changes. Why don't we buy this back and see if we can turn it into something that's really different that we just couldn't. We're already on a path before. Like, let's just blank slate. Are you up for it? And he was like, maybe, like who else would you get? And I was like, here are the 3 other people I'm thinking of. Mm. And he was like, I'm in. And I learned a very valuable lesson as I went around to the 5 people that I wanted to stay behind. I told everybody the same thing. I'm not sure what we're going to do. I have some ideas, but I think we can make some money doing this. Are you in? And they were like, who else is in? And I was like, this person, this person, this person, and this person. And they were like, that's who I would pick if I was doing it. I'm in. So what did I learn, right? Critical lesson. A players, people who are really exceptional, who just deliver orders of magnitude more value than their B player counterparts, right? I'm not using those terms in any derogatory way. Want to work with other great people. Great people want to work with great people. Great people do magical things. Marginal people are like a cancer that spread and infect your organization with mediocrity. And nothing makes great people leave more than the cancer of mediocrity spreading. It's aggressive terminology. I certainly don't mean to be denigrating to people, but it's just the cold, hard reality is great people aren't like twice as productive as okay people, right? They're 100 times more productive, right? They just do much more intelligent stuff the first time. Where you do it right, you don't have to do it twice.
I mean, it's very applicable in business, and I love hearing that analogy. I mean, I think we both agree with you, but it's also very applicable in sports. You see this with the best athletes want to play with the best athletes, and they want to play against the best athletes.
Absolutely. Of course. Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I don't know how to say it. It's embarrassing to me that it took me 10 years to figure out some shit that should be pretty obvious, right? It seems obvious to me now. But it's crazy. You see it all the time. Like people don't believe that this is true. They say it's true, but it's difficult to cultivate a culture of candor, a culture of accountability, a culture of performance, a culture of empathy, a culture that embraces analytical decision making. Like just a bunch of stuff that's hard to do. You that everybody talks about doing, but doesn't necessarily do all the time.
You need time too, and you need to fail, because no one can assemble a team like that of exceptional all-stars from scratch with no experience. All you're trying to do is find someone with a heartbeat and the willingness to say, yes, I'll help you, 24-year-old or 28-year-old or whatever, and just build a team around you and make mistakes together. But ultimately, you got to a point where you actually had the opportunity to restart with people you had already identified over the years as these are winners.
That was really the core of my hypothesis, more so than we will become a jeweler, here's how it will work. And ultimately, it'd be completely disingenuous to suggest that I figured out what we have now in 2016 when we first started selling jewelry, right? I didn't. The reality is the group of us meandered our way here, but what we have now has become quite interesting. I believe in primarily due to the quality of the people that figured out this solution. I mean, the problem we solve currently is extraordinarily a difficult problem. No one's been able to do it at scale. We actually make everything fully custom from scratch with each customer every time. It's not like you can pick from this smorgasbord of menu options and put it together. Like, you want a rabbit with rubies in the eyes and a diamond in their mouth? We'll make that. You are into owls? You want to do an owl-themed ring? Make an owl-themed ring. You want one owl with one wing because when you were growing up, you saw an owl with one wing out your window and that means a lot to you? Boom, we'll make it for you because we're actually making it custom. Now, the problem with doing this is you actually have to design all these things with the customer. So you have an incredibly operationally complex challenge. And by the way, just as I think, as you alluded to earlier, Zach, you get a tremendous amount of back and forth with the customer. There's a long sales cycle, long decision cycle, lots of changes. All this stuff is expensive. The soft cost associated with making a sale is expensive. But there's a few magical things about what we do that I've hung my hat on that I believe are going to make us an unbelievable company, right? I've watched you guys build your company. You've done a lot of the same things, right? The core is ultimately we discriminate against no one but an unhappy customer. And everyone leaves happy every time, no exceptions. Why? Well, one, because obviously we like to make people happy, but two, we're in a high average order value, comparatively high margin, high acquisition cost business with lots of competition as you move up in order value, which means the value of one repeat or one referral is astronomical. Astronomical. I need you to tell a friend, and my annuity base of revenue is repeat and referral. And that's our business. That's how a jewelry business has been built that way for 100 freaking years. We're just using a different medium.
So how do you do that? Because in a typical jewelry store, it's like, go see Doug, the jeweler on Main Street. You know, Doug helped my grandmother and yada, yada, yada. And listen, we face the same problem with insurance. We need referrals and insurance, but it's much more of a low revenue per client. It's very, very, very pivotal and extraordinarily important. But in your aspect, it's very different. It's very, very different. It sounds like you absolutely depend on it. So how do you do that at your place here? What tips do you have for that?
Our strategy is unbelievably simple. It's like the simplest strategy in the history of mankind. So because we make everything custom from scratch every time with every customer, that means making a ring with us, an engagement ring with us, means you come in, you start talking to somebody. We might sketch 5 concepts. We'll actually sketch a bunch of concepts for you. You'll pick one. We'll build a computer model. We'll make changes to it. We'll make suggestions. You might be working with us for 3 weeks or a month. Some people work with us for 5 months until they get what they want. The depth of the relationship we build during this creation process is unbelievable. And the product that we put out at the end not only is indicative of you and symbolic of your relationship, but also, I think we have it on our reviews page, we say, fair warning, you might fall in love with us also. Right? And that's exactly what we want, because it is a magical experience. Like, this is, I'm not selling you a widget. You know, you go buy a widget from anywhere. Like, this is your engagement ring. And by the way, I'm making a product that's built to show off to other people. That's the whole point. You're going to show it to 25 friends. What are you going to tell them? Oh, yeah, he went to Jared's. No, right? You can be like, you know what? He custom designed this. Let me show you the sketches that he made. Let me show you all the images. Let me show you the story that went behind how much thought he put into this. And therefore, how much meaning it has. Yeah, he got it custom made. Where? At custommade.com, right? You should go there, check them out. So we do another thing too, right? Our review policy, which I think is very interesting. Each of our reviews from a customer purchased one of our custom designed piece of jewelry. We never alter reviews. We offer no incentives for submitting a review of your experience. By the way, we offer nothing for referring your friends. You don't get $50. You don't get $62.50. You don't get a 5% discount. We don't have sales. We don't. Incredibly simple, right? Here's what we do. We give you an amazing price. We do an amazing job, and we make you super happy. We are better, faster, cheaper, and you get something one of a kind. That's it. That's our sales pitch. That's our whole business model. Now, there's a whole operational infrastructure to make that happen, but that's all we do. We just do it very consistently.
Seth, this makes me want to propose again.
People say that in their reviews. They're like, I love this process so much. The only problem is, you know, until I get divorced, I don't have anything else I can buy from you. And we're like, don't worry, there's anniversaries. We're going to have opportunities to work together.
A lot of people we talk to focus so much on the problem they're solving that they really forget to assemble the A team. And they get so obsessed with this problem. And you kind of did it maybe a little bit the opposite, where you're like, I'm going to get the most interesting, challenging team together, and we're going to go solve a problem.
Yes, that's what we do.
It seems like it worked, but I give you a lot of credit for a lot of what you did, but especially that, because I know, and Matt knows, on the outside looking in here, one of the hardest things to do is surrounding yourself with people who are better than you. Because it's difficult as the entrepreneur, as the leader of the CEO, whatever you want to call yourself, it's difficult to surround yourself with people who are better. Because it's naturally the human instinct is to surround yourself with people who are not as good as you. And you did the exact opposite, it sounds like, and it sounds like you're thriving because of the team, and secondarily you're solving a very interesting problem now.
Well, I set a low bar. It's very easy to be better than me. You know, we've been working on it for 5 years. It's a super hard problem. I mean, the average customer, we might go back and forth with an average customer 40 times. If you're making an engagement ring with us, no exaggeration, you will talk to a sketch artist, a CAD designer, a jewelry consultant who will shepherd you through that process so it's not overwhelming in any way for you and enjoyable, a design lead team who will sit on top of this process and make sure that everything works as it's expected, a production lead team, which makes sure that what's designed is actually produced, and then a customer service team that makes sure you're happy with it, a photo team that takes photos of it, a shipping and fulfillment team that ships it to you and makes sure it gets there safely. And all of these people have to talk to each other, and the customer experience has to be absolutely seamless. You can't feel like you're getting passed around 16 ways from Sunday. And that all has to be coordinated. And by the way, it's an engagement ring, usually, not always. So it's not like we can be, oh yeah, it'll be there like on or around June 8th, right? Either it's there on June 8th or it's not there on June 8th. You know, there's no plaque for second place. Like it has to be right every time.
That's extremely complex, that process. And for anyone who's in business and understands, or in business for themselves and understands the challenges between handoffs, between one person to another, to another, to another, and all the disruption that can occur with a client experience in that process, understands how challenging it is. Now, you went from a central team of a few to over 100 people in 5 years. Is not, you say it's like, oh, it's been forever. 5 years is a short period of time for that type of growth, especially if you guys have never done this before. I mean, that type of operation and process is much different than the marketplace you guys created in the past. How do you get there? I mean, talk a little bit about like how you guys developed and designed the system and who you brought in to help sort of scale the company.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we had the advantage of having built a fairly sizable analytics infrastructure. And we built that infrastructure originally to measure our makers' interactions with our customers. Right. So we were like, geez, how many leads does a maker have to talk to in order to win a job? Or right, all the things that you might measure in a sales funnel process. But the problem, of course, is we don't have any control of them. Right. What used to happen is you want an engagement ring, you come to Custom Made, you post up your job. Really, it's a lead. It's not a job yet, right? Because nobody's sold you anything. And then a bunch of makers would talk to you. And so Joey talks to you and he's like, I can make you a platinum ring. You definitely want platinum. And then Mary talks to you and she's like, you should get 18 karat gold. And then, you're like, I don't even know what's going on. Like, I just want to make sure I don't screw this up. That was the process originally, right? And we tried to build an analytics infrastructure to measure everything and try to figure out how we could influence the behaviors on both sides of the marketplace. Because we're trying to get Joey to sell more effectively and not get tired out by all the people he has to talk to in order to make one sale. And we're trying to get the customer to not be tired out by this insanely overwhelming process where nothing has been merchandised for them. And we can't really pull any of the levers. It's not our sales process. It's not our product. It's Joey's product. It's Mary's product. So we then started utilizing that infrastructure to run our own business. And of course, now the infrastructure has been completely changed. And now our new software system, which runs our custom jewelry business, is far more complex than our marketplace business. But yeah, I mean, we measure everything, right? Like actions, time to responses. So the way I like to think about our business is you're getting something, it's expensive. I call it the customer anxiety curve. So what happens? You've experienced this yourself, I'm sure. You commit to buying something expensive. It's online. You haven't talked to anybody on the phone. We don't have a phone number. We might change that in the future, but thus far we haven't needed one, right? What happens? You kind of commit a little bit and then the anxiety starts to build. As soon as you hear something from us that reassures you that you know it's on track, you know what's going on, your anxiety goes back. And then it starts to build again immediately, right? So the key is, and then what happens? If your anxiety gets up to here, you contact us and say, hey, what's going on? You're not saying you're nervous, but in my mind, you're nervous, right? We failed already. My job is to contact you here before you even think to contact me. My job is to already calm you down before, I want your anxiety curve to go like this so that you don't have to ride this because it makes you happier in the end. Jesus, this was smooth. Holy cow,
I love that for any business. That is so applicable across all industry.
I think so.
We had a guest on a couple weeks ago. Her name was Tamsin Webster, and she talked about how there is buyer's remorse. That's a real thing, but there's no such thing as believer's remorse. And it sounds like what you're really trying to do throughout this entire process, is to use your data points to know when to communicate with a customer so they don't get anywhere near that state. And that's genius. I don't care if you have 10 phone numbers or if you have no phone numbers. That is necessary in business. It's absolutely necessary. I mean, you were in real estate. Same process. Absolute same process. When you buy a home, you're like, what is going on? I have no idea. I haven't heard from anyone. Are we still going to close? I don't even know. I don't know. And all of a sudden you get that email, closing's been pushed back. No big deal though. You're like, what the heck? I was out in the open. But
in your business, I'm sure it's the claims, right? Like, who's the first person I want to talk to when something happens in my house? Call Zach. He'll tell me what to do. You You're not underwriting the goddamn claim. Like you're not adjusting it. But it doesn't matter. The person is in a moment of anxiety. They're in a moment of vulnerability, and they want to talk to the person they trust, and that's you. And you're either around or you're not.
But so few businesses get that right, especially if you're delivering a product, because what you're thinking internally is, marketing drives the prospect, sales closes it, then deliverable or onboarding team kind of onboards, and then servicing and getting referrals, maybe in our business renewals, et cetera. But there's very few people that will deploy resources and think about the touch points between those that keep people from reaching that anxiety level you just talked about.
It's a product, but it's not a product, right? Because the product is so expensive and it's a high anxiety situation. Everything about it is high anxiety, right? Like,
it's emotional.
Of course, we sell valuable stuff, but we really sell symbolism. Like, there's a lot going on in this piece. It's got to be correct.
Well, there's so much, and also, like, you guys have tremendous empathy for what we'll just say the male is going through. They got a big moment, let's say the engagement process. They're hoping that the person says yes. Then they're going online. They probably tell a friend they're going online to buy the jewelry, and that person's like, what are you doing? Like, that's a ton of money to go online. Go to Chuck or Steve or Jane or someone they know. There's recommendations all over the place because everybody wants you to use who they use. So it sounds like, have installed this automatic, repetitive touch point process to keep the client kind of with you so they don't lose track, because this is a lengthier process. This is a lengthy sales cycle.
Very interesting. Need a ring tomorrow where, another thing, we're not for you, right? I mean, we don't do that. The funny thing is, it's interesting you say that, right? Because you and I think that way, right? Because when we got engaged, I'm sure we're like, oh, you want to talk to my brother-in-law? He's in the diamond. Everyone has a friend in the diamond business, right? Like, it's crazy.
They all get it for cheaper.
All get it for cheaper. The person who's getting engaged is not really our age. We're old now, right? How old is the person who's getting engaged? Well, they're 27 on average. So there's a lot of people older than 27. There's a lot of people younger than 27. So think about what that arithmetic average means, right? If I'm building a business right now, starting now, for the next 5 years, who's my customer? My customer is 22 to 23 years old right now. That's my customer.
Interesting.
So how do they buy? Do they ask their brothers, uncles, cousins, former roommate who's in the diamond business on 47th Street where they should get a diamond? Hell no.
No, they're all stupid. All those people are dumb.
Yeah.
They're on TikTok, or I'm not on TikTok. Maybe I should be on TikTok. Should I be on TikTok? Doesn't matter.
We're not, so we can't answer that.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. I don't even know where they are. They're on something the three of us have never heard of. It's the next TikTok, the TikTok behind the TikTok, the TikTok 2, right? They're not worried. They're not as anxious about making a large purchase online. They're used to communicating online. They live their whole lives online. Fine jewelry has not come online very aggressively, although it's coming online very quickly now. 90% plus of the business is still transacted offline. And it's a big industry.
I read this quote. I'm going to read it to you because it's on my mind recently. It says, capitalism will always show up to commoditize whatever insight you used to have. And I believe it's Seth Godin, but regardless, like, you get the picture. It's like your great idea now is not going to be a great idea later. And businesses like yourself are constantly thinking about that let's just say the Jareds of the world, the Descenzas or whomever, are going to try to go online and crush you, like in the business you already are, potentially, whatever.
Sure.
When you hear that kind of quote, what are you thinking that you're trying to do in custom made the next 10 years? What are you thinking about?
I mean, look, I'll write down the recipe, and if someone else thinks they can cook it, I mean, God bless them. This is hard. I don't know if I'd do it again if I wasn't where I was right now. If you saw the number of systems required to do this at scale, if you're $1 million business, that's a totally different thing. But we're not. We're an 8-figure business, right? That's a different animal. And to become a 9-figure business, every system has to scale, and you still have to scale the customer experience. If you scale the business faster than you scale the customer experience, you don't have an annuity base of customers. You start pissing people off because you tried to get too big, too quick, and you stopped doing what is going to get you to the promised land, which is making every customer happy. So my reaction to a quote like that is, I mean, first of all, of course he's correct. And, people think that they're innovating. And I respect that. Innovation is uncomfortable. And if you look at least in the jewelry space, people's ideas of innovation are essentially I think, for the most part, a tweak on the existing model. Because think about it like this. Why does Jared's fundamentally, what's missing, right? What's missing? So what's missing, in my opinion, their model is built around the idea of I can make a bunch of something, spread it around to different venues like peanut butter, and sell it to various folks, right? Obviously, if I can make more than one of something, my cost for making each one goes way down, right? Like, it's crazy to make only one of every single thing that you sell. Like, it just sounds like a bad idea. It sounds like a bad business. So people haven't done it because it's super hard. Like, it's super hard to scale. You're like, I'm not doing that at scale. It's crazy. You'd need like this, and you'd need that, and you need this. Right. You need all that. We're building it. Right? Because here's the thing. What is truly differentiable as a business in the next generation, right? In the next version of e-commerce? What's truly differentiable is something that cannot be commoditized. And what we sell cannot be commoditized. Go price shop me against someone else. Yeah, maybe they could do it cheaper. I don't think so. I don't even think they can make it. Because there's so many processes you need to, like, even to specify it, right? But what's differentiable? What's the barrier to entry that we've erected? The barrier to entry is the strength of the relationship with our customer. Our soft costs, the people in the jewelry industry would look at them and say, yeah, your sales costs are crazy. No, those are capital investments in the relationship we're building with our customer. They're not costs. That's different. A capital investment is something that you expect to generate income for you later. A cost is something you expend now and you want to manage it down. Those are not the same thing. It's just a different way of looking at the same problem. I'm not saying their way is wrong. It's been a fantastic business for a long time, but people don't buy the same way they did before. Now they buy some different way. And just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not the right solution.
Our listeners need to just rewind to the point when you started talking about, if you outscale, the speed of the business from the experience you're giving to this point where you just stop, because I know it's just the most brilliant 5 minutes that I've listened to. So thank you for sharing that first off. And it's clear that you are confident, and probably should be even more confident, that you're positioned very well in terms of what you're offering, how you're offering it, the lack of competition in that niche space, with buying habits in general, and people's comfort level, especially younger generation, of purchasing something that they will always want to purchase, but doing it online. It sounds like you're positioned very well.
I mean, we don't know. We think so. I mean, we could be wrong on many key points. I mean, obviously, custom feels like a big commitment. One of our big challenges is to convincing the mass market customer. If you go after the person, if you define your market as people who are looking for something custom, your market is small, right? There's only so many people looking for custom. The question is, how do I convince someone who's looking for an engagement ring and wants something unique? Now all of a sudden you're talking about a much larger market. So it's all how you define the market. Like, people are like, oh, custom's a niche business. People have been telling me that for 10 years. That's true. That's true. Custom is not a market in and of itself. Custom is a solution to a customer problem. And the customer problem is, I don't want the same ring that everyone else has. I want something that is symbolic and meaningful. So we're the solution to that problem. We're not a service model.
Seth, how do you, just out of curiosity, how do you effectively communicate messages to your team, not just during this crazy time we're in now, but growing fast, super complex process and operation? You have an awesome leadership squad. What does communication internally look like?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. As you might guess, it's unique. I personally have a visceral aversion to meetings. I don't like meetings that are update oriented. I don't like meetings that report the news. I feel like those ideas are best communicated in writing in the context of a plan. I'm a huge believer in planning, writing things down, documenting your work, picking goals, figuring out whether you hit those goals, doing postmortem. But for the most part, if you saw our body of information and plans that we're running at any point in time, you'd be like, it's crazy. It's crazy, right? Like, And it is. But here's the thing. If I have a question like, I wonder what 20 sales initiatives are in our backlog right now. I don't need a meeting with Chava Kenny in my office to answer that question. I can just go look at her dashboard. She has it all written down. We have wikis. We have data-driven dashboards. I don't want to have a meeting about something I can figure out on my own. I want to have a meeting about things like ideas. I want to discuss things that are inherently and have meetings around things that are inherently creative. Now, other people on my team have more one-on-ones than I do, but I would say even then, like, there's not a lot of meetings in our organization. It's very light. But I would say I call it the Rosen walking alignment test, the RWAT. I came up with it like 6-7 years ago. Here's how you know if you're doing a good job on internal communication. You don't need to overcomplicate it, right? And I've seen a lot of people brain fuck this problem, right? You ask a third party to take everyone in your organization for a walk and ask them basic questions around what you're working on. What are the top 3 goals of the organization? What are the top 5 initiatives people are working on each team? How are those going to drive you towards your company goals? Like, ask questions around what the company is doing, why is it doing it, and where is it going to take you? And see if you get the same answers. If you take 10 people for a walk and you get 10 different answers and no one has any idea what's going on, clearly your internal communication strategy is flawed. If everyone says exactly the same thing, clearly your internal communication strategy is working. I see people all the time are super prescriptive about ways to do it. It's like, oh, we read this book, we're going to do it like this. We read this book, we're going to do it like that. There's a million different ways to get to the same place. You have to find your style. You have to figure out what works. But at the end of the day, what matters? What matters is, are people on the same page? Are they working on intelligent stuff? Do people feel empowered to speak up? Basic stuff. And you can determine that with basic 1972 era tactics. Walking has been around for a long time.
Seth, that's an excellent answer. That's an excellent answer. I think that Matt and I have read those books. We've been those people. I'm not a huge proponent of the quote, the end justifies the means, but I am a huge proponent of that quote if you can answer those 3 questions that you talked about. If you can get to the end and your team knows what each team is working on, why they're doing it, and where they're going to be when they get there, I don't care how it's done. It doesn't matter. And I think that's an excellent thing people can re-listen to. Thank you for sharing.
It becomes even more important if you want to move from 7 to 8 to 9 figures. I think you can be $1 million business, and Jimmy in sales could have no idea what John in service is doing and why it's important to the company's goals or mission. But if you want to really get bigger and scale, it's so essential. I mean, from process documentation to the nth degree, it sounds like, to everyone being on the same page, feels like running in the same direction at least. It becomes so critical when you're that size. Is this something that's learned through failure and mistakes and experience, or do you feel like there was a specific moment or mentor or process or facilitator or coach or something that you kind of helped learn the way of building the business the way you have?
I had a mentor in business school. He used to be the CEO of Pepsi Japan. He's passed away. I spent a lot of time with him, this guy, Frank Kelly, and he said something that I've always remembered, which is, a plan is not a plan unless it's written down. And that stuck with me, right? So what does it mean? It means just what it says. Oh, I have a plan. All right, what's your plan? Well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. All right, where's it written down? Well, it's not written down. Okay, it's not a plan. There's no such thing as a plan that isn't written down. That means you don't have a plan. You've got some ideas. You're thinking about some stuff. That's not a plan. So that was part of the impetus. And part of it is I'll wake up at 2 a.m. and be wondering about something, and I want an answer right away. So what are my options? I can go distract my team members who are probably thinking about something totally different, have them come up with some complicated answer to my question, put the pressure on them to answer my question quickly because I want to know about it not tomorrow, not after breakfast, right? I want to know about it right now. That's an unreasonable request. I don't want to distract my team with those types of requests, but I still want to be able to see all the information real time, and I know other people feel the same way. So as I've tried different approaches, that's worked for me, right? And people like it in my organization because I leave them alone more generally, but B, I don't need to bother you to answer something that's already been answered.
I'd love to know, you personally, what keeps driving you forward. Love to kind of hear from you, what drives you, what keeps you up, what gets you motivated, what's Why are you so inspired to do what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, when for a long time, it was the money. I was like, I got to make it my father, when I was a little kid, would always be like, owning a business is the best way to make money. And so you should be a business guy. Every year that goes by, that just becomes less and less significant to me. Of course, money is the best scorekeeper of whether you're doing a good job or not. But ultimately, as I get older, what I've come to value is the creativity, the professional growth of the team, the satisfaction of watching them be successful, the satisfaction of having created something. So on a business level, I've finally gotten comfortable with the fact that I'm not going to have a problem making enough money to do whatever I need to do. I was there a while ago. I'm not, that's done. I'm not that worried about that anymore. And that's freeing. At the same time, I spend a lot more time thinking about, are the people around me, customers and employees, better for this being around? Like, am I making people better? Are things better? Is this industry going to be better because we were here? Is the customer better off because they found us, right? And so at the highest level, that's what drives me, right? And on an actual straight, very just a block and tackle business perspective, the coolest part of our business is we're part of people's happiest, most special moments. And we got a review 2 days ago. The woman's like, my son passed away. My husband and I were looking for something to commemorate him. Crazy stuff. We get those stories every day. We're part of the best stuff. Could I make money as a payday lender? Sure. Sure, good. Do I want to? No. Do I have any problem with it? Heck no. I think other people can make money doing that. There's tons of ways to make money. We just like doing this. It's fun. It's fulfilling.
I love that answer. We've heard this from a lot of entrepreneurs, and it's always really nice to hear your side of it. But impact, influence, legacy, these are all things that, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially once they've made it through sort of the uneasy, uncertain phase of, will I survive? Will this even work? Should I even be a business owner? When they've gotten through that to okay, I still make a lot of mistakes. We have a lot of room for growth, but I kind of gotten past that. I think impact becomes much more important and front facing. So thanks for sharing that.
It's incredible that a decision to buy a website after, a real estate and another career, just, purchase a website because, we're going to go take a look at this and see if we can make it better, turns into this just beautiful journey, introspective, and a big journey ahead of you. What a cool story. What a cool story. A lot of good decisions made along the way, but a heck of a lot of learning. Chapter 2 looks a lot more fun than Chapter 1.
God, I hope so. I like Chapter 1. It was good. I mean, you guys know you built a business. It's very hard, very challenging. And for every good decision I made some bad decisions. But, I think persistence, as you guys know, it matters. So hopefully what I lack in everything else, I'll pick up for with persistence.